Maya Chen wiped the sweat from her forehead as she balanced 3 plates on her left arm and grabbed the coffee pot with her right hand. The morning rush at Rosie's diner was always crazy, but today felt even worse. Her feet were already aching and she still had 6 hours left on her shift. "Table 4 needs more syrup," called out Pete, the cook, as he slid another plate of pancakes across the pass. Maya nodded and grabbed the syrup bottle, forcing a smile as she approached the family at table 4. The little girl had syrup all over her face and her parents looked like they hadn't slept in weeks. "Here you go, sweetie," Maya said, refilling the syrup dispenser. The little girl beamed up at her with a gap-toothed grin that made Maya's heart warm despite her exhaustion. This was Maya's life now. At 28, she worked the morning shift at Rosie's diner, then rushed home to check on her mother before heading to evening classes at the community college. She was studying to become a nurse, but some days she wondered if she'd ever make it through the program. Money was always tight. Her mother's diabetes medication cost more each month, and the rent on their small apartment had gone up again. Maya's tips from the diner helped, but it was never quite enough. She'd learned to stretch every dollar, buying generic groceries and wearing the same 3 uniforms until they were practically falling apart. But Maya never complained. Not out loud anyway. She'd grown up watching her mother work 2 jobs to support them after her father left when she was 12. Her mother had taught her that complaining didn't pay the bills, but kindness and hard work eventually paid off. "Maya, honey, can you handle the coffee refills?" asked Linda, the other morning waitress. Linda was 55 and had been working at Rosie's for 15 years. She treated Maya like a daughter and always covered for her when Maya had to miss work for her mother's doctor appointments. "Of course," Maya replied, grabbing the coffee pot and starting her rounds. She knew most of the regular customers by heart now. There was Mrs. Patterson, who came in every Tuesday and Thursday and always ordered 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast. She was a retired teacher who lived alone and liked to chat about her garden. Then there was Bobby, a construction worker who stopped by before his shift and always left a $5 tip, even though his coffee and donut only cost $3. He said Maya reminded him of his daughter who lived in another state. And there was Walter. Walter Hoffman came in twice a week, always on Tuesdays and Fridays, always at exactly 8:30 in the morning. He was 82 years old, though Maya had only learned his age when she overheard him talking to Linda about Medicare. He was a small man with gray hair that he always kept neatly combed, and he walked with a wooden cane that looked like it had seen better days. Walter always sat at table 7, the corner booth near the window. He would order black coffee and a slice of apple pie, and he would sit there for exactly 1 hour, reading a paperback book or just watching the world go by outside. He never caused any trouble, never complained about anything, and always left exact change plus a $2 tip. Maya had noticed things about Walter that maybe others hadn't, like how his hands sometimes shook when he picked up his coffee cup, or how he would sit very still for a few moments before standing up, as if he was gathering his strength. She'd seen him struggle with his coat on cold days, but he never asked for help. There was something about Walter that reminded Maya of her grandfather, who had passed away when she was 16. Her grandfather had been the same way, quiet, dignified, never wanting to be a burden on anyone. Maya's grandfather had lived alone after her grandmother died, and Maya always wondered if he had been lonely, even though he never said so. "Morning, Mr. Hoffman," Maya said as Walter settled into his usual booth. She'd started calling him by his last name after learning it from his credit card, though he'd never officially introduced himself. "Good morning, Maya," he replied with a gentle smile. His voice was soft and gravelly, like he didn't use it very often. "How are you today?" "I'm doing well, thank you." "The usual?" "Please." Maya poured his coffee and went to get his pie. Pete always made sure to save Walter a fresh slice, even though he'd never asked Pete to do that. There was something about Walter that made people want to take care of him, even though he never asked for anything special. When Maya returned with the pie, she noticed Walter was reading a book about gardening. "Do you have a garden, Mr. Hoffman?" she asked as she set the plate down. Walter looked up, seeming surprised that she'd asked. "I used to," he said. "My wife Rose and I had a beautiful garden behind our house. Roses, tomatoes, green beans. Rose had a way with flowers that I never understood." His eyes got a distant look. "I still live in the same house, but I can't keep up with the garden anymore." "I bet it was beautiful," Maya said. She wanted to ask more questions, but the breakfast rush was picking up. and she could see Linda struggling with a large table. It was, Walter said simply, and went back to his book. Maya hurried away to help Linda, but she found herself thinking about Walter throughout the morning. She imagined him in a big house with an overgrown garden, eating his meals alone, reading his books alone. It made her heart ache a little. When Walter finished his coffee and pie, he stood up slowly, using his cane for support. Maya watched him from across the diner as he carefully counted out exact change and left it on the table with his usual $2 tip. He nodded goodbye to her as he made his way to the door. Maya realized she looked forward to Walter's visits. In a job where most customers were in a hurry or stressed about something, Walter's quiet presence was calming. He never rushed her, never complained about the food, and always treated her with respect. As Maya cleared Walter's table, she noticed he'd left his book behind. She picked it up, planning to call after him, but when she looked out the window, she saw him slowly making his way down the sidewalk. She decided to keep the book safe for him until Tuesday. The rest of Maya's shift flew by. After work, she drove her old Honda to the grocery store, carefully checking prices and using coupons her mother had clipped from the newspaper. Then she went home to the small apartment she shared with her mother. "How was work today, honey?" her mother asked from her recliner in the living room. She was watching her afternoon talk show, a cup of tea cooling on the side table. "Good," Maya said, kissing her mother's forehead. "Same as always. How are you feeling?" "Oh, you know me. I'm fine." But Maya could see the tiredness in her mother's eyes, the way she held herself like everything hurt. The diabetes was getting worse, and the medications weren't helping as much as they used to. Maya tried not to think about what would happen if her mother needed more expensive treatment. That evening, as Maya sat at her kitchen table studying for her anatomy class, she found herself thinking about Walter again. She wondered if he had anyone to check on him the way she checked on her mother. She wondered if he got lonely in that big house with the overgrown garden. Maya didn't know it yet, but in a few days, she would have a chance to find out. Tuesday morning started like any other day at Rosie's diner. Maya arrived at 6 in the morning to help Pete set up for the breakfast rush. The coffee was brewing and the smell of bacon filled the air. She tied her apron and checked the sugar dispensers, making sure everything was ready for the early customers. But when 8:30 came around, Walter wasn't in his usual spot. Maya found herself glancing at the door every few minutes, wondering where he was. Walter had never missed a Tuesday in the 8 months she'd been working at Rosie's. She even had his coffee ready and had asked Pete to set aside a fresh slice of apple pie. At 8:45, the door chimed and Walter finally appeared. But something was wrong. Instead of his usual steady walk, he was moving slowly, almost shuffling. His face was pale and he was breathing heavily. Maya watched as he made his way to table 7, gripping his cane tighter than usual. "Morning, Mr. Hoffman," Maya said, approaching his table with the coffee pot. Up close, she could see small beads of sweat on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Good morning, Maya," Walter replied, but his voice was weaker than normal. He sat down carefully, as if the simple act of walking from the door to his table had exhausted him. Maya poured his coffee, but Walter's hand was shaking more than usual as he reached for the cup. She pretended not to notice, but her concern grew. "I'll get your pie," she said gently. "Actually," Walter said, stopping her, "I think I'll just have the coffee today." That was unusual. Walter always had his apple pie. Maya had never seen him skip it, not once. "Are you feeling all right, Mr. Hoffman?" Maya asked, unable to hide her worry anymore. Walter looked up at her, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes that made her heart ache. "Fear, maybe. Or exhaustion." "I'm fine, dear," he said, but his voice didn't sound convincing. "Just a little tired." Maya wanted to say more, but the breakfast rush was starting and she had other customers to serve. She kept an eye on Walter throughout the morning, though. He sat at his table longer than usual, just holding his coffee cup and staring out the window. He barely touched the coffee. Around 10 o'clock, when the morning crowd had thinned out, Maya noticed Walter was still at his table. That was unusual, too. He usually left by 9:30. She walked over to refill his cup. "Eichel problems. The least I can do is cover your expenses." "You're not just an old man," Maya said firmly. "You're my friend." Walter's eyes lit up at that word. "Friend," he repeated softly. "I haven't had many of those lately." As the months passed, Maya learned more about Walter's life, and the picture that emerged made her heart ache for him. His son David lived in Seattle working for some big company. David called once a month, usually on Sundays, but the conversations were short and focused on Walter's health rather than real connection. "He's busy," Walter would say whenever Maya asked about David. "Important job, important responsibilities. I understand." But Maya could hear the loneliness in Walter's voice. She started visiting him at his house sometimes after his appointments, just to make sure he was settling in okay. The house was exactly as Walter had described it, well built but showing its age, with Rose's yellow bedroom and a kitchen full of memories. The garden Walter had mentioned was indeed overgrown, but Maya could see remnants of what had once been beautiful flower beds and vegetable patches. Rose could make anything grow, Walter said one afternoon as they stood looking out at the tangled vines and weeds. "She had magic hands, I swear. Every spring this whole yard would come alive with color." "It's not too late," Maya said. "Gardens can be brought back," Walter shook his head. "Too much work for these old bones, and too many memories." Maya understood. Sometimes holding on to the past, even when it was painful, felt easier than trying to move forward. During this time, Maya's own life was getting more complicated. Her mother's condition was worsening and the medical bills were piling up. Maya had to drop one of her classes because she couldn't afford the textbooks. She picked up weekend shifts at the diner, which meant even less time for studying. Walter noticed the stress Maya was under, even when she tried to hide it. "You look tired, dear," he said one day as they sat in the waiting room at the medical center. "I'm fine," Maya said automatically, but Walter gave her a look that said he wasn't buying it. "Talk to me," he said gently, so Maya did. She told him about her mother's latest blood sugar episodes, about the insulin that kept getting more expensive, about the rent increase she wasn't sure how to manage. "I just feel like I'm running as fast as I can and still falling behind," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Walter was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and patted her hand. "When I was your age," and he said, "I thought life was supposed to be easy if you just worked hard enough. Took me a long time to learn that working hard is just the beginning. The real challenge is keeping your heart open when things get difficult." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "You could have walked past me that first day when I needed help," Walter said. "You could have said it wasn't your problem. But you didn't. You opened your heart and look what happened. You made room for one more person in your life, even when you already had more than enough to worry about." Maya felt tears prick her eyes. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not doing enough for anyone. Not for my mom, not for my studies, not even for myself." "Maya," Walter said firmly, "you are 28 years old, working full-time, going to school, taking care of your mother, and somehow finding time to drive an old man to doctor's appointments. If that's not enough, then I don't know what is." 3 months into their routine, Walter's appointments became more frequent. What had started as monthly visits turned into weekly ones, then twice a week. Maya rearranged her entire schedule around Walter's medical needs, and Linda at the diner was understanding about Maya's increasingly flexible hours. But Maya was getting worried. Walter seemed frailer each week, more tired, more breathless. The doctors were running more tests, and Walter was spending longer periods in the examination rooms. "Is everything okay?" Maya asked after a particularly long appointment. "Just the usual old age complaints," Walter said, but Maya could see the worry in his eyes. That evening, after dropping Walter at home, Maya sat in her car outside his house for a few minutes. She watched the lights come on in the kitchen and imagined Walter heating up a can of soup for dinner. Eating alone at a table meant for two. She thought about her own small apartment, where her mother would be waiting with questions about her day. Despite all their problems, Maya realized how lucky she was to have someone who cared about her daily life, someone to share meals and worries with. Walter had been alone for 5 years now, and Maya was starting to understand just how alone he really was. Their friendship had become as important to her as it was to him, but she had a feeling that whatever was happening with Walter's health, their time together might be more precious than either of them had realized. The appointment on Friday morning was different from all the others. Maya could sense it the moment she picked up Walter from his house. He was quieter than usual, and his hands were shaking more than she'd ever seen them. "Dr. Peterson wants to go over some test results," Walter had told her on the phone the night before. His voice had sounded strained, worried in a way that made Maya's stomach tighten with concern. As they drove to the medical center, Walter stared out the passenger window without speaking. Maya tried to make light conversation, but Walter only gave short answers. She could feel the tension in the car like a heavy blanket. Whatever it is, Maya said finally, we'll figure it out together, okay? Walter turned to look at her and Maya saw tears in his eyes. You're a blessing, Maya. I hope you know that. The word sent a chill through Maya's chest. Walter sounded like he was saying goodbye. At the medical center, Maya walked with Walter to Dr. Peterson's office. Usually she waited in the main lobby, but today Walter asked her to come closer. Would you mind waiting right outside the doctor's office? He asked. I know it's silly, but I'd feel better knowing you're nearby. Of course, Maya said, squeezing his arm gently. I'll be right there the whole time. Maya sat in the hallway outside Dr. Peterson's office, watching nurses and patients walk by. She tried to read a magazine but couldn't focus on the words. Every few minutes she checked her phone, though she wasn't sure why. Time seemed to crawl by. After 45 minutes, the office door opened. Walter came out first, moving even slower than usual. Dr. Peterson followed him, a kind-looking man in his 60s with gray hair and gentle eyes. Mr. Hoffman, Dr. Peterson was saying, I want you to think about what we discussed. And please call your son. This is the kind of news that family should hear sooner rather than later. Maya's heart sank. She stood up as Walter approached, and she could see that he'd been crying. Ready to go? Walter asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She helped Walter walk to the elevator, her mind racing with worry and questions she didn't know how to ask. They rode down to the main floor in silence. When they reached Maya's car, Walter sat heavily in the passenger seat and closed his eyes. Mr. Hoffman, Maya said gently. Do you want to talk about it? Walter opened his eyes and looked at her. My heart is getting worse, he said simply. Much worse. Dr. Peterson says I need to think about getting my affairs in order. Maya felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. What does that mean exactly? It means I probably don't have as much time left as I thought I did, Walter said. His voice was calm, but Maya could see the fear underneath. Maybe a few months, maybe less. Maya's eyes filled with tears. Did Dr. Peterson mention any treatments? Surgery? Medicine? At my age, with my heart the way it is, surgery would be too risky, Walter said. And the medicines aren't working anymore. My heart is just worn out, Maya. 82 years is a long time. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Have you called your son yet? Walter shook his head. I will. Tonight. David's going to be upset that I didn't tell him sooner, but I kept hoping the doctors were wrong. They sat in the parking lot for a few more minutes, neither of them ready to drive. Maya was trying to process what she'd just learned. Walter, this gentle man who had become such an important part of her life, was dying. And soon. Maya, Walter said, I need you to know something. These past few months, having you in my life, it's been the happiest I've been since Rose died. You gave me something to look forward to, someone who cared about how my day went. I can never thank you enough for that. Maya was crying openly now. Mr. Hoffman, you don't need to thank me for anything. You've been just as important to me. I want to give you something, Walter said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped box. This was Rose's. I've been carrying it around for weeks, trying to work up the courage to give it to you. Maya shook her head. I can't take something that belonged to your wife. Please, Walter said. Rose would have loved you. She would want you to have this. With shaking hands, Maya unwrapped the box. Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant shaped like a rose. She wore this every day for 30 years, Walter said. I think she'd be happy knowing it's with someone who understands the value of taking care of people. Maya carefully fastened the necklace around her neck. Thank you, she whispered. I'll treasure it. Just as Maya was about to start the car, a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the parking space next to them. Maya glanced over, wondering who would drive such an expensive car to a medical center. The driver's door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, probably in his early 40s, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit and looking like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. He had Walter's gray eyes and the same strong jawline, but there was something sharp and intense about him that Walter didn't have. The man looked around the parking lot frantically. Then his eyes landed on Walter through the passenger window of Maya's car. His face went pale. Grandpa? The man called out, rushing toward their car. Walter's eyes widened in shock. David, what are you doing here? David reached Walter's side of the car just as Walter was trying to get out. Dr. Peterson called me. David said, his voice shaky. He said you had an appointment today and that I should be here. Grandpa, why didn't you tell me how serious this was? Maya quietly got out of the car, feeling like she was intruding on a private family moment, but Walter looked around for her. David, Walter said, I want you to meet Maya. Maya, this is my grandson David. David looked at Maya for the first time, really seeing her. He noticed how carefully she was standing near Walter, ready to help if he needed it. He saw the way Walter looked at her with genuine affection and trust. You're Maya, David said, extending his hand. Grandpa has mentioned you in our phone calls. You're the waitress from the diner. Yes, Maya said simply, shaking his hand. Your grandfather is a wonderful man. David looked between Maya and Walter, and Maya could see him trying to understand the situation. Were you at the appointment with him? David asked. I drove him here, Maya said. I drive him to all his appointments. All of them? David's voice was quiet now. How long has this been going on? About 6 months, Walter said. Maya has been very kind to me. David stared at Maya, and she could see something changing in his expression. Realization, maybe. Or shame. 6 months, David repeated. Grandpa, you've been going to doctor's appointments for 6 months, and I didn't even know. You're busy, Walter said quickly. I didn't want to worry you. Busy, David said, and Maya heard something break in his voice. I've been too busy to know that my grandfather needed help getting to the doctor. David looked at Maya again, and this time she saw tears in his eyes. You've been taking care of him, he said. It wasn't a question. We take care of each other, Maya said quietly. David ran his hands through his hair, looking overwhelmed. I run a construction company, he said almost to himself. I have 1,200 employees. I make million-dollar decisions every day, but I couldn't find time to drive my own grandfather to the doctor. David, Walter said gently, you're here now. David knelt down next to Walter's wheelchair that Maya had gotten from the medical center. Grandpa, I'm so sorry. I should have been here. I should have known. Maya watched as David took Walter's hand, and she could see the family resemblance clearly now, but she could also see how different they were. David looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, while Walter had learned to find peace despite his troubles. Maya, David said, standing up and turning to face her. I need to ask you something. Are you free tomorrow? I'd like to talk to you, both of you. There are some things I need to make right. Maya looked at Walter, who nodded encouragingly. I suppose so, she said. I work until 2. I'll pick you both up at 3, David said. We have a lot to discuss. As Maya drove Walter home, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. David hadn't just seemed like any concerned grandson. There was something about the way he carried himself, the expensive car, the way he talked about his business. Maya had a feeling there was more to David's story than she understood. But watching him with Walter, seeing the pain in his eyes when he realized how long his grandfather had been struggling alone, Maya thought maybe David wasn't as different from Walter as she'd first assumed. Maybe he just needed to remember what really mattered. That night, as Maya lay in bed wearing Rose's necklace, she wondered what tomorrow would bring. Walter's diagnosis had shaken her world, but David's unexpected appearance had added a new element she hadn't seen coming. Something told her that their story was about to take a turn none of them could have predicted. Saturday. Afternoon came faster than Maya expected. She finished her shift at Rosie's diner at 2 o'clock, her mind racing with questions about what David wanted to discuss. She drove to Walter's house where they had agreed to meet. David's black Mercedes was already parked outside when Maya arrived. Through the front window, she could see David and Walter sitting at the kitchen table, talking quietly. It struck her how similar they looked when they sat next to each other, despite their different worlds. Maya knocked gently on the front door, and David opened it immediately. Maya, thank you for coming, he said. Please sit down. We have a lot to talk about. The three of them sat around Walter's small kitchen table, the same table where Walter had eaten meals alone for the past 5 years. David had brought a folder full of papers, and Maya noticed his hands were shaking slightly. First, David said, looking directly at Maya, I need you to understand something about me, about what I do for work. Maya nodded, waiting. The construction company I run, David continued, it's not just any construction company. It's Hoffman Construction. My grandfather started it 60 years ago as a small carpentry business. Today we build office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes all over the country. Walter smiled proudly. David built it into something I never imagined it could become. The company is worth about $50 million, David said quietly. I have more money than I know what to do with. And somehow I let my grandfather struggle to get to doctor's appointments because I was too busy making more money. Maya felt her stomach drop. $50 million? She was sitting across from someone who had more money than she could even imagine, while she counted every dollar to pay for her mother's medication. Maya, David said, yesterday when I saw you helping my grandfather, when I realized you'd been taking care of him for months while I was nowhere to be found, I was ashamed. But I was also amazed. I don't understand, Maya said. David opened his folder and pulled out several pieces of paper. I spent all night making phone calls, doing research. I know about your mother's diabetes. I know about her medical bills. I know you dropped a class this semester because you couldn't afford the textbooks. I know you work double shifts and still can't make ends meet. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks. The thought of this wealthy stranger investigating her life made her uncomfortable. I'm not telling you this to embarrass you, David said quickly, seeing her expression. I'm telling you this because what you've done for my grandfather, when you have so little yourself, is extraordinary. Walter reached across the table and took Maya's hand. David has an offer for you, dear. I hope you'll listen. David slid a piece of paper across the table to Maya. It was a check. When Maya saw the amount, she gasped. $100,000. I can't take this, Maya said immediately, pushing the check back toward David. Yes, you can, David said firmly. And you will. This isn't charity, Maya. This is payment for services rendered. You've been my grandfather's caregiver for 6 months. You've driven him to appointments, made sure he ate, checked on him, worried about him. You've done the job that I should have been doing. But I didn't do it for money, Maya said. I did it because I care about him. I know, David said, his voice getting emotional. That's exactly why you deserve this. You gave my grandfather something I couldn't give him with all my money. Genuine care and friendship. Walter squeezed Maya's hand. Take it, dear. Please. David is trying to make things right and you have dreams that need funding. Maya looked at the check again. $100,000 would pay off her mother's medical bills, cover her nursing school tuition, and maybe even allow her to quit one of her jobs so she could focus on her studies. There's more, David said. I've already talked to my grandfather about this. I'm moving back here. Walter's eyes lit up. David is relocating the company headquarters, he explained. He's going to run the business from here so he can be close to me. And, David continued, I'd like to offer you a job. We need someone to coordinate care for our employees and their families, help them navigate the healthcare system, make sure they get to appointments, connect them with resources. It's basically what you've been doing for my grandfather, but on a larger scale. Maya's head was spinning. I don't have any qualifications for that kind of job. You have the most important qualification, David said. You care about people. The rest we can teach you. The job pays $60,000 a year with full health benefits for you and your mother, and will work around your school schedule. Maya looked at Walter, then back at David. This is too much. I can't accept all of this. Maya, Walter said gently. Do you remember what you told me that first day when I tried to pay you for gas? You said that's what people do for each other. Well, this is David doing for you what you did for me. David leaned forward. My grandfather told me something yesterday that I'll never forget. He said that in 5 years of being alone, you were the first person who made him feel like he mattered. Do you understand how that makes me feel as his grandson? Maya could see tears in David's eyes. I built a $50 million company, David continued, but I couldn't give my grandfather the one thing he needed most, to feel valued and cared for. You did that. You, with your old Honda and your part-time waitress job, you gave him something I couldn't. The three of them sat in silence for a moment. Maya fingered Rose's necklace, thinking about the past 6 months, about how much her life had changed since she first offered to drive Walter to the doctor. Okay, Maya said finally. I'll take the job. But I have conditions, David smiled. Name them. I still want to be Walter's driver for his appointments. That's not work for me, that's friendship. Done, David said. And I want to finish nursing school. Even with this job, I still want to be a nurse. We'll make sure your schedule works around your classes, David promised. And one more thing, Maya said, looking at Walter. I want to help you fix Rose's garden. Walter's eyes filled with tears. "Maya, that garden is a lot of work." "I know," Maya said. "But spring is coming, and I think Rose would want to see it bloom again." 3 months later, Maya stood in Walter's backyard, admiring the rows of flowers they'd planted together. David had hired landscapers to clear the weeds and prepare the soil, but Maya and Walter had chosen every plant themselves. The roses were blooming beautifully, and the vegetables were growing strong. Walter sat on a new bench David had installed, watching Maya water the tomato plants. "Rose would love this," Walter said, his voice weak but happy. Walter's condition had stabilized somewhat with the best medical care David's money could buy, but they all knew his time was limited. He spent his days surrounded by family now. David visited every evening after work, and Maya stopped by most afternoons after her classes. Maya had quit her job at the diner and was thriving in her new role at Hoffman Construction. She loved helping families navigate healthcare challenges, and David had been true to his word about accommodating her school schedule. Her mother's diabetes was under control now with better medication and regular doctor visits. For the first time in years, Maya wasn't worried about money. "Maya," Walter called from his bench, "come sit with me for a minute." Maya sat down next to Walter and he took her hand. "I need to tell you something," Walter said. "When Rose died, I thought my life was over. I thought I was just waiting around to join her. Then you came along and reminded me that life is about the connections we make with people." "Mr. Hoffman," Maya started, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish," he said with a smile. "You saved me, Maya, but more than that, you saved David too. He was turning into a machine, all work and no heart. Now look at him." They both looked toward the house where David was visible through the kitchen window, preparing dinner for the three of them. "You brought my family back together," Walter continued. "You gave an old man friendship when he needed it most, and you showed a successful businessman that real wealth isn't measured in dollars." Maya squeezed Walter's hand. "You gave me just as much, Mr. Hoffman. You showed me that kindness always comes back, even when you least expect it." Walter passed away peacefully 6 months later, on a sunny Tuesday morning in his yellow bedroom, with Maya and David by his side. He'd lived to see Maya graduate nursing school with honors, and to watch his grandson transform from a workaholic into someone who understood the importance of relationships. At Walter's funeral, the church was packed. There were construction workers and business executives, neighbors and medical staff, and dozens of people whose lives Walter had touched in small but meaningful ways. Maya spoke at the service wearing Rose's necklace. She talked about how Walter had taught her that the smallest acts of kindness could change everything, and how taking care of each other was the most important work any of us could do. After the funeral, David established the Rose and Walter Hoffman Foundation, with Maya as its director. The foundation's mission was simple: connecting elderly people with companions and helping families navigate healthcare challenges. Maya kept her promise to Walter about the garden. Every spring, she and David planted new flowers and vegetables, and every summer the backyard bloomed with color. They kept Walter's bench there, and sometimes they would sit together in the evenings, talking about their day and remembering the gentle man who had brought them together. Years later, when people asked Maya how her life had changed so dramatically, she would touch Rose's necklace and tell them about a simple choice she made one Tuesday morning. She chose to help someone who needed it, without knowing what it might lead to. "That's the thing about kindness," Maya would say. "You never know when a small gesture will change everything. But if you pay attention, you'll see that it always comes back to you, usually in ways you never expected." And in Walter's old house, where David still lived to stay close to the memories of his grandfather, Rose's garden continued to bloom every spring, a reminder that love and kindness, like flowers, can grow in the most unexpected places and bring beauty to the world long after the gardener is gone.